watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello, and welcome to On the Beat on Germantown Municipal Television. I'm your host, Rodney Bright, Deputy Chief of the Germantown Police Department. On this show, we will provide you, the viewers, with a behind-the-scenes look at policing in Germantown and introduce you to some of the men and women who work hard to keep Germantown one of the safest cities in Tennessee. We also hope to provide information related to public safety in a manner useful to our community. Today, I'm glad to welcome Special Agent Jason White from Homeland Security Investigations to the show to discuss the widespread opioid and heroin epidemic. Later, we will speak with Police Chief Richard Hall about his long career with the Germantown Police Department, and then we'll speak with Kelvin Cowans about his work highlighting members of law enforcement in the Mid-South. But first, I'm glad to welcome Special Agent Jason White to the show. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I know a lot of viewers may or may not know the role of Homeland Security Investigations in the federal government, law enforcement. Can you talk a little bit about maybe an area of focus right now for you guys?
Absolutely. The Department of Homeland Security was created in 2003 as a response to the attacks of September 11th. Homeland Security Investigations is the second largest investigative body within the federal government. We're tasked with investigating cross-border crimes, crimes that have an international facet to them.
I know that one area of concern in our community and really across the country in today's culture and society is that of the opioid and heroin addiction and overdoses, and I know that's something you guys have really become extremely focused on. Can you talk about the efforts a little bit in that area?
Absolutely. We began focusing on the opioid epidemic seriously in the Mid-South region approximately 2 years ago. We saw a spike in the increase, a definite spike in the interdiction of opioid coming from foreign sources in the United States through a variety of different means and channels of smuggling. What really began our focus even more intently in this area was when we saw it showing up on the streets as well.
And I know that for law enforcement, at times there could be some territorial issues when it comes to investigations and maybe in the drug area, but one thing that I think I've seen here locally is just the collaboration in how to address this epidemic. I know it seems like no community is safe or immune from having some issues. Can you talk about maybe some of those partnerships and what you're doing with other law enforcement agencies?
We've noticed the same thing from our agency. It's been a wonderful collaborative effort throughout the entire federal government and also with our state and local counterparts. I don't think anyone's life has not been impacted by this opioid epidemic. We personally, I've been involved as a supervisor with the Border Enforcement Security Task Force, which has state and local entities on it, as well as the Drug Enforcement Administration. It's an effort to try to attack this problem on the international front, also on the domestic federal level, and on the state and local level.
I know that we talk about heroin and people hear heroin and they may think, well, that was years ago, but do you have any idea or the thoughts about why that's become so prevalent, again?
The most information we have seems to be that this is an outgrowth of prescription medication abuse. Specifically, as we look at it, we deal not only with cross-border smuggling, but we deal with intellectual property right issues. So we look at it not only from individuals who are bringing the raw materials into the country to manufacture opioids, but individuals that are here that are making counterfeit pharmaceuticals, counterfeit oxycodone, for instance, that has been a particular issue in the Mid-South.
And thinking about the counterfeit issue and some of the synthetics, and I think that's become a big concern because maybe the ease of availability with technology today, and I think that there's one word that's become of a concern to law enforcement and our agency, and that's fentanyl. And I think that we see that show up, and you may think you're ordering something, but you may or may not be getting what you think that pill may be. Can you speak a little bit about the fentanyl issue and how that's surfaced?
Fentanyl has become the most prevalent of the deadliest drugs that we deal with. The dosage of fentanyl is measured in micrograms and not grams. So if someone is selling tablets that have fentanyl in them, if they don't have advanced or sophisticated instruments to measure this out, one pill can kill you. One pill can kill anyone.
Well, I know that you can't really turn on a news program or follow something on social media without seeing something to an overdose or related to opioid use and abuse and initiatives maybe from the government. Are there certain areas that you guys are maybe focused on right now that are more of a priority maybe than others?
Well, anything that deals with fentanyl or opioids are automatically one of our highest priorities. This administration has been clear that we face an opioid epidemic, and we're using a cross-agency, whole-of-government approach to this issue.
Well, not only are you guys educating the public with the problem, but also I think there's been an intentional effort to help educate people in my agency and other law enforcement agencies that may be out on the front line. Can you speak a little bit about, maybe a strategy as far as training?
We've been hosting trainings in the use and the maintenance of Narcan for law enforcement and first responders. We've also conducted training with medical first responders. If they're making entry to a house, looking for indicators that there might be a pill lab there, where we're dealing with a lot of raw material that may even be airborne.
I think maybe just as we wrap up here, a little bit of information for our community. Are there things that maybe someone in a household, in a family, that may have a concern about a loved one that they may think be abusing pills or illicit drugs? Is there a few things that maybe they could look for?
Well, generally speaking, I would look for signs that these materials, these pills, have been gotten illegally or through at least unusual means. We all know how we get prescriptions from the doctor. If we see bulk amount of pills in bags or powders or partially formed tablets in bulk quantities, my suggestion would be to immediately call law enforcement and don't touch the materials.
Okay. I think that's very good advice, and I just want to say thank you. It may be unusual for some to see federal law enforcement and local law enforcement, but just want to assure our viewers that the partnerships that we have here locally are very strong in that area, and we're all working together to do what we can to make a difference in this area. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's time to take a short break. When we return, we'll talk with Police Chief Richard Hall about his career with the Germantown Police Department. Please stay tuned.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Really?
Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to On the Beat. I'm your host, Deputy Chief Rodney Bright. Policing in Germantown certainly has gone through some changes in the last 30 plus years. There's been one constant here at the police department through that time. Here today to talk about his career and looking forward and what's going on with the police department is Germantown Police Chief Richard Hall. Chief, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rodney.
I'm glad to see you here today, and first I must congratulate you. There's been another milestone in your career here recently. Congratulations on another year of service, and that's 32 years. Yes. And I know you and I have worked together a lot over my tenure here in the last 10 years in leadership. Just tell the audience what it was like early on, and maybe what drew you to the Germantown Police Department.
Well, I hired October 14th, 1985, which this past Saturday, was my anniversary, if you will. I started out in law enforcement, going through a park ranger training course at the University of Memphis. Dr. Dwyer held that training, and I worked 2 summer seasons in Atlanta as a national park ranger. And my first full-time job was Arkansas State Park Ranger, in which I had a good friend, Danny Shelton, who was here with the Germantown Police Department. Well, after being raised in Memphis and living in Atlanta, it was hard to adjust to a small rural town, so I found myself back in Memphis, and I came out here to Germantown, and Chief Cochran was the chief at the time, and interviewed with him, and I believe when I was hired here, I was at like number 31 is the number of officers that were on the department.
I know things have changed a lot since then, and can you talk about maybe how policing was early, maybe the first part of your career?
Well, we were a very small department. As I said, there was 31 total. That's including the chief. There was actually 1 detective and 1 detective sergeant and 1 temporary detective. The zones we had in the city, we would only run 4 zones, 4 officers. At times, like on a Sunday, there may be only 2 officers and a sergeant. So to look at how the city's grown now to almost 100 officers, 99 commissioned officers, and now we're at 7 different districts. And we've become a lot more populated city and a lot busier city in all aspects.
I know the challenges probably were a little bit different then as opposed to today. Can you speak about maybe what's different as far as what our officers have to maybe respond to, or what their focus is today, as maybe compared to what it was back then? I know we're dealing with more traffic and more people and some calls for service.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is, the thing that's been constant is the traffic. Now, it's certainly grown, but having 2 major highways that go through Germantown, we've always had a challenge at reducing the number and severity of automobile crashes and protecting our neighborhoods. And one thing I'd have to say, the constant there would be our citizens have always supported us, always supported good policing and keeping their communities safe. I think the biggest thing that's changed is how dangerous it's become, and I think that's not only our area. We share 3 contiguous borders with a very large metropolitan area, and like a lot of cities, the crimes have become more dangerous. There's been more guns involved, and I have concerns about our officers' safety. That's why we do so much training with our officers.
I think that's certainly very paramount, and we focus a lot on our training and officer safety and trying to stay on top of trends and best practice. And I feel like under your tenure, we've become a model in a lot of different ways. And speaking of your tenure, this is very unique, I think, in our profession that you've been the Germantown Police Chief for a number of years, and that's, how many years is that?
Right. Well, January of 2002, I was sworn in, so a little over 15 years I've been chief.
And I think it's a chief's job in today's law enforcement world are certainly scrutinized a lot and probably a lot more brief. Can you talk about you know, maybe what you learn and what you share and speaking with other chiefs around the state and around the country?
Well, and we do meet. Last week, it's called the TACP, Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police, and we meet and do training and share best practices. But looking at our department, and I have to brag on you and the other command staff members, I've been very fortunate. I've surrounded myself with very smart people, and we have a very cohesive team, and we do a lot of training and staying involved with what the challenges are.
Well, I know that you're looking at policing back when you started and a little bit later, you know, when I started, things were a little bit different. We didn't have as many people, and challenges are a little bit different now. Kind of looking to the future, we know that people tell us that, you know, the number one reason they live out here in our city is about public safety. What do you think are some key things as we move forward to how do we keep Germantown a safe place to live?
Well, and I have to go back to, and I would have to brag on our mayor and our board of aldermen on supporting us with the number of officers and the equipment and the training that we need. The high visibility, having officers out there actually taking care of the little things, and when I say little things, whether it's a car with the tail light out, and just, you know, we give a lot of warnings. I think the public doesn't realize how many warnings, but just by the fact that we're taking care of the small things, it keeps some of the more dangerous things away from our city. I say high visibility or rapid response. You know, we get to any call in less than 4 minutes, but on an emergency call, we're less than 3 minutes on arrival there. And, you know, educating our city on safety, kind of like this episode here, if we can share any kind of safety tips to our community, that certainly helps them be safer.
I think one thing that's two things that, you know, you remind me of about being successful in what we do here is, number one is the people that go out and do the job day in and day out here. We got to make sure we work hard to recruit and retain, you know, the best people, because we're very particular, I think, when we hire, but also the community support. And can you speak a little bit about that over your tenure, how you've seen just how the citizens really, you know, show up and support our officers?
Well, I mean, even before we had more professional organizations such as Citizens Police Academy and the Cop Stop, we always had Neighborhood Watch. And I always noticed when I was over investigations, I'd go out to the community and you know, I was always astounded by the number of people that take time out of their weekend or their evening to show up and engage with the police department. And more often than not, certainly we were made aware of any concerns or challenges we might have, but a genuine appreciation. And you know, when I'm out in the community just getting lunch or dinner, you know, people come up and say how much they appreciate us.
And I think that's very important, and I know that our officers feel that, and it's one thing that I think we talk about as a leadership team is we don't take that for granted, and we work really, really hard to maintain that. So first of all, congratulations on another year of service. 32 years is quite impressive.
Thank you.
And congratulations on coming up on 16 years of in the head leadership position. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining us today on The Beat.
Thank you very much. Glad I was here.
It's time for a short break. After the break, we'll speak with Kelvin Cowans, the author of Good, Blue, and You, someone who focuses on positive things that law enforcement is doing in the Mid-South area. Be back in a bit.
Oh!
Checking your fantasy league?
Nah, just my 401k statement.
Nice. Where'd you find the money for that?
I just been saving a little every month.
I can't seem to save anything.
Well, what about all this? What about the money you're spending?
What money? It's gone before I can get my hands on it.
I got a pizza for a Todd.
Hey, can somebody spot me?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind.
It's 547.
Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to On the Beat. I'm your host, Deputy Chief Rodney Bright. There's been a lot written about police agencies across the country over the last few years. We are fortunate to have someone from our area who has initiated some positive stories about the work performed by members of law enforcement agencies in the Mid-South. Here to talk about his work is Kelvin Cowans. Kelvin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here, sir.
I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last couple of years and familiar with some of your work, and just would like for you to just maybe start off telling the viewers a little bit about what you're doing and maybe what's led you down the path to write some stories for one of our local newspapers.
Absolutely. It started out with community and police relations, and I had a friend of mine, Melissa Monet, that brought me to the table of law enforcement, and she was like, what can you bring to this table? And of course at that time I'm sitting in a room with about maybe 30 or 40 law enforcement officers. And I'm like, you know, I'm intimidated just sitting here. I said, you know what, the best thing that we can do for the community is to let them know them, to humanize the officers, because everyone isn't married to an officer. Everyone doesn't have an officer that is a uncle or auntie, you know, so I was like, they don't know them. And so that's when I started doing the interviews. It's called Good Blue and You. The bylaw of it is, just as a neighborhood shouldn't be judged by a few bad apples, neither should any law enforcement agency. And so I started the conversation and found out a lot about you guys, man. I mean, you're preachers, you're basketball coaches, you got double degrees, just very busy in the community, and people don't know that. And you know, just like a sports team, you guys have a following, and your fans want to hear from you. So that's what I thought I could bring to the table, and that's how Good Blue and You was started.
And I just commend you for that, for sure. And I think you hit on something that, you know, a lot of times in our business, we're not ones to necessarily go out and promote ourselves maybe the best. You know, I think maybe that's a good characteristic of a police officer, is humility. As you've gone and talked to people around our area, have you got any feedback maybe from the community that have seen some of your work?
Yes, I get emails all the time. After they read the articles about you guys, again, there's Germantown Police Department, there's Shelby County Sheriff Office, and the Memphis Police Department. So I'm getting feedback and emails. I even get emails from the directors. Director Rowlands of the Memphis Police Department, he even emailed me and just said, hey, thanks for bridging the gap. You know, thanks for what you do, you know. And so when I get those, and I get them all the time, even from just regular people in the community that's like, hey, thank you, that's our officer over here, and we love him. And it's like, you guys have to have that light shined on you, because no one will know that you give out 100 bikes during Christmas time. No one will know that you sponsor football and basketball teams. All they know is what the mainstream media puts on when something bad happens. And no one wants to hear for their team only when they lose or something bad is happening. They want to hear from you guys. You know, they want to know what's going on, what you got going on this month, what's going on next month, you know, what you're working on. So I think that it has been very positive.
And on the other side, you know, sometimes, you know, we can be a little skeptical of maybe people outside our profession, and but I know personally from your work with our department how much we've appreciated that and the feedback, and we, you know, it's a chance for us to learn. What's your sense from the law enforcement community about the work you're doing, and maybe how you can be kind of that conduit of goodwill and good messaging?
You know, this is the big part, because there's always, you know, when you look at the mainstream media, there's always police interaction with minorities. And so it's like, okay, coming from this guy, okay, we got to listen to the message, because you're talking about someone with a formal criminal history. I mean, you know, $180,000 bond at one time. And so it's like, how did you go from being arrested by the police to now you're working with them? Well, you know what, you grow up, and maybe you grow up under the wrong people or the wrong influence, and they tell you all police officers are this, all police officers are that. Until you grow up, I apologize, until you grow up and then you find out, oh, they came to see about me. They came to check on my family when someone broke in my house or when something went wrong with me. And so then you begin to form your own opinion about law enforcement. And so, you know, that's how it started. So now I guess it's a history of, well, this guy's unique, because who does this, you know?
Yeah.
So
I agree. I just, you know, for us, you know, try to talk to our staff, and as I go around and speak to some of our counterparts and talk to our officers about how important it is that every interaction you have, you know, that they leave there, you know, with a respect for what you do, for what we do, and I just think that's really important. And you mentioned a little bit about your background. I know there's some other areas that you're probably involved in, and certainly the Memphis metropolitan area needs good role models. And it's not just people in law enforcement or other corporations, but it's some people that have been there and done that. How do you go about, or do you have an opportunity to speak to people that maybe are at that fork in the road, or maybe they've made some bad decisions, and how they can right themselves?
Absolutely, all the time. I joke with Deborah Fessenden. She's a lawyer for the Shelby County Sheriff's Office. I joke with her all the time. I said, Miss Debbie, you have me going into prison and jail more than I actually went when I ran the streets. So I'm always in there speaking to the youth. I'm speaking to adults, and I'm giving them the mindset because I can relate to where they're at. And I've spoken at schools, so many different schools around the Shelby County area, and just encouraging and also sharing my story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that you can turn your life around, number one, or you can avoid jail or running the streets altogether. And you don't know what's in you until pressure is applied, and then all of a sudden you find out, hey, I can be a writer, or hey, I can be a police officer. I can be a conduit in the community that builds this positive energy thing. And so I do my fair share, and I enjoy every minute of it.
What about some feedback maybe from someone that you work with, maybe mentoring, and that some success stories? What about, how does that make you feel, or do you have an example of that maybe?
Oh man, it makes me feel real good. When I think about Bruno Mars, Cameron Whalum is a hooligan for Bruno Mars. And Cameron was also my point guard on my basketball team. We played at halftime of the Memphis Grizzlies game and everything. And so when I see him performing at the halftime of the Super Bowl, or I see him up there dancing and singing and everything for the Victoria's Secret fashion show, and he's up there with Bruno Mars, my heart melts, because that's just one that I help push along, as well as others. So I just hope that my life can be an example to the people in the community, and that they see that, and you can turn around, you can do something positive, you can bridge the gap, and
absolutely,
that's all.
Well, I'd say as a lifelong Memphian, I'm very proud of your example, and I think you certainly are an example for us and for a lot of people in our community. And I want to say thank you for helping to bridge that gap through the good blue in you, and just the way you interact, even when you're not writing, just every day going about and representing yourself and trying to do good for our community. So for that, I say thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, sir. Thanks for joining us. That's all the time we have on this edition of On the Beat. Stay tuned to us throughout the year as we spotlight public safety programs and partnerships and bring you interviews with people who strive to make Germantown a safe place to live, work, and play. If you'd like more information on this show or any other show on Germantown Municipal Television, please visit www.gmtvonline.org. If you have questions about policing in Germantown or topics you would like for us to discuss, feel free to send those by email to my attention at rbright@germantown-tn.gov. We'll see you when On the Beat returns next month.